Hello, my name is Joel Simpson, and whether it's late night for you or still early in the morning, on behalf of the Peccadillo Picture Sofa Club, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this treat. As a global online community, we are going to focus on a beautiful offering of cinematography through the film Lonesome. Together, we're going to watch some clips and then simply chat about them. Those of you watching can submit your questions and responses, and we'll make some space for answers and responses at the end. Lonesome really draws us in to contemplate queer experiences of intimacy, pervasive loneliness, longing, grief, suicidal ideation, the impact of absent parents, PrEP, queerphobia, interracial relationships, racism, power, and all that can make us feel on our lonesome. We're grateful today to have this up close and personal chat with two of our creators. We welcome you, Craig Boreham, the director of Lonesome, and also we welcome you, Josh Lavery, one of the actors of this wonderful film. And we send healing wishes to Zarif, who is feeling unwell and can't be with us. And we really want to honour you for allowing us as a community to have this gift of this timely film. So sit back and relax as we now watch the trailer of this wonderful film.
And know boys like you, being on your own, you like it that way.
What brings you to Sydney?
There was this guy I was seeing. He was married, had a young family. Someone saw us. It's not like him. I just took off.
Lovely offering. I've watched that trailer a few times now, and it makes me feel really, really warm. Craig, let's begin. You cast yourself back right at the beginning. What was your intention in making?
Right back at the beginning, I was interested in I guess looking at characters who exist outside the bubble of the queer ghetto in Sydney. I wanted to look at people kind of closer to my own experience, I guess, and my friends and you know, the people I live with. I mean, I didn't really feel like I was seeing those people in a lot of stories that that get made. And yeah, that was kind of the starting point. I initially went into the project. I met the producers, Ulysses and Ben, who had this idea to make a independent slate of films, and I didn't have a script at the time. I just had a meeting with them, and they asked me to pitch something, and I had these two separate scripts that I'd been working on that had these two strong central characters. One was Tib and one was Casey. And then after I spoke to those guys, I just had this light bulb moment of, well, what would happen if these two worlds collided and these two people came together? And the script kind of was born out of that, really.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to fall asleep on you. Is this a huge enough for you?
Like to keep it simple?
That dude, he your boyfriend?
Never met him before. So you legit, or are you on your way home from a white boy country trade themed party?
I'm not from here.
I figured.
Just got here today.
Didn't take you long to get your big smoke slut on. Looked like you enjoyed yourself.
I did.
What brings you to Sydney?
I've never seen the ocean.
Never.
No. I always wanted to. I thought I'd come check it out.
Are we back?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're back.
Technology, but let's stay with the heart. So having watched that scene, there are so many threads that I think about that are evoked. And you seem to be highlighting the ways that sex can come first and getting to know each other often comes later. And there are these attempts at intimacy, I think, through these perfunctory questions and these defended and closed answers. And I was wondering, Josh, if you could speak to what you think Casey might have been longing for in this scene.
Yeah. I always love those, like, I think it's very much gay culture, is like those awkward kind of conversations after sex rather than before. And I think that, like, in that scene, like, Casey's kind of like lingering about, and I think there's a bit of energy from Tib being like, "You're still here."
Yeah.
But I think it's because it's something that's new to him. He doesn't really. I don't think he really understands the kind of like the etiquette. You know what I mean? Like, get out of my house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he's consistently hungry. And I wonder if it was some sort of metaphor for what he might be longing for. What do you think some of the things that he was longing for?
Yeah, I guess connection, I think, was probably the biggest one. You know, something that he's never had before. So I think, you know, in these moments throughout the film, whenever he connects with someone, that's, you know, that's what he's after. He's after connection and, you know, to feel safe.
Yeah, indeed. And I was curious, Craig, about the choice to feature the actors naked in this scene and the intention of the nudity that runs throughout the film. I wonder if you might speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was important to, well, you know, firstly, I think in those kind of encounters, it always seems strange to me when you see people post sex scene in a film that they're suddenly clothed and it's like it didn't really happen. So that was sort of important, but also, you know, there was, you know, when we were talking about the film and the texture of the film and the tone of the film, like it's very much about the way gay men, especially negotiate sex in sex spaces, and you know, bodies are part of that, a big part of that, and you know, male bodies always seem to be so taboo to put on screen. They're somehow held up as, you know, sacred, and you can't put a penis on a screen. You know, it's
Yeah.
too much. But we sort of really wanted to break that and use that because it's, you know, it's a big part of that encounter. So, you know, that was always the intention, and we, you know, talked about that a lot during the casting process when I was first talking to these guys about it. And the script was written that way. It was very clear when you read the script what you're going to see. So there was no kind of mincing words. I wanted everyone to go into it knowing that that's what we were planning to do, and everyone who is in the film was very comfortable with that and wanted to do that, wanted to tell that story.
Yeah.
You know, and there's something really beautiful about that scene being kind of awkward and uncomfortable, and these two characters who don't know each other and yet they're completely exposed at the same time.
Yeah. And speaking about penises, Craig, how was it to have yours on screen? Sorry, not Craig, Josh. How was it to have yours on screen in this? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, like, I was down for it. You know, I love queer cinema that's, you know, like, I love explicit queer cinema because usually, you know, I find it all to be pretty sanitized. But that scene we just watched, that was the first day that Zarif and I shot together.
Ah,
Yeah, so we were like straight into it, naked in front of each other. And we filmed it. It took, you know, we filmed that for like most of the day, that scene. But you know, at first, you know, we're pretty shy. You know what I mean? It's but I mean, by the end of it, like, we forgot we were naked, and we, you know, we'd call cut, and then they'd be like, "Robe," and we'd be like, "Oh shit," you know, we're
yeah.
still naked, and we forgot.
Yeah. And what was the process of deepening the intimacy for the two of you throughout the filming?
I think we were really lucky because as soon as I live in Melbourne and we filmed in Sydney, so we didn't actually meet each other until during rehearsals. But Zarif and I, like, we just hit it off instantly. So we're really lucky that, you know, we kind of like had this really great connection outside of filming. You know, so we just were there to support each other throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, that feels really important. All right, let's take another look at another clip that happens later on in the film.
You two work well together. You seem close.
Yeah, I guess we are.
Oh. No.
Sorry. I thought.
No.
I'm so sorry.
He's a good boy. He reminds me of my son. He's cheeky. And a charmer.
Where's your son?
No, we don't really speak much. I guess I wasn't the most supportive mother. I questioned some of his choices and things turned really bad between us. I think that's why I like having Tib here. It just reminds me of my Adrian.
This is such a tender scene. You give attention to the confusion, I think, and the complexity that's often evoked in this quest for intimacy between what is sexual and what is parental can often get really confused. And I love the way you return to the the water drinking, but this time with the two glasses, making this distinction perhaps between these two types of intimacy. And this is really gorgeous and beautiful sense of the redemption between the estranged parents and their children, with both characters movingly extending towards each other without the shame and the heartbreak that they experience with their respective childs and parents. And I really loved in an earlier scene that where Tib doesn't hold back in referring to their dad as a cunt. So let's now have some open space between us to consider what's been said here about dads who may have been cunts, mums who may have been estranged or absent for a variety of reasons, and what gets confusing about intimacy. Let's open the conversation between the three of us a little here.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, that was very much something I was thinking about. This both Casey and Tib have these absent families and strained relationships with their fathers, and then we meet Carol, who is the other point of view in that situation. This mother who maybe also has a strained relationship with her son, but still cares deeply. And even though we only hear from Casey's mother in moments of these phone calls, and her interaction with him is quite cold, and yet she's still reaching out, still wants to know that he's safe, still wants to make sure that he's okay in the world, even though they're apart.
Yeah. Your response, Josh?
Yeah, I think it's, you find it's quite a common narrative within the queer community that, at least one of our parents are going to be a cunt. Yeah, but I really love that scene because, he's misplacing the the affection that this older lady is showing him, and it's she's coming from a parental place, but he obviously didn't receive that. So he's confused about it and stuff like that. But that's one of my favorite moments in the scene, and that was like one of my favorite days of filming. Annie is just like an incredible actor.
Yeah, she does a great job of shifting, because the scenes prior to that with her are quite comedic in a way, and then this whole journey trajectory of her character kind of shifts in those scenes, and you get to see what's happening in the background under the surface.
Yeah. I really love as well the way that you attend to the lack of shame, because it really could have gone quite a different way when Casey reaches out, but that doesn't happen. She is quite in response. You got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that too. Like, I mean, she could have reacted a number of ways, but I think what she senses from Casey is not that he's being predatory or it's more coming from a place of a desperate need to connect with somebody, and his intention is misplaced because he's been given a bit of a bum steer from Tib about the relationship with this woman, but she sees it. She immediately sees this kind of lost lad looking for some kind of connection.
Yeah, and I'm really curious about the drinking of the water. Could it's replayed in that earlier scene? I know we had some technical difficulty. You see, both of them share from the one glass, and in this scene, they've got two separate glasses. I wonder if you might give some attention to that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, water is such a thing for me. I love using water as a texture. But that moment, the moment with the glasses was kind of spontaneous. I just let them play out the end of the scene, and I didn't call cut. they just.
And then we were just like we just kept drinking, and it's like it was kind of funny, wasn't it?
It was very funny, but it worked beautifully. So when I got into the edit suite, we Danielle and I, the editor, just loved the moment, and so we decided to leave it hang there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's so much silence in this scene. Tell us, speak to that if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think it adds to the tension of the scene. I really wanted to play with minimal sound. There's quite a bit of score in the film, but it's a nice moment to not have that and just have the sounds of suburbia. Creating that space.
And what was it like for you, Josh, in holding that silence and that tension in the scene?
Yeah, I think with this scene, especially when they're watching Tib, I think Carol's words, like, it's something that he's been wanting to hear from his mum.
Yeah.
So I think when he says, "Don't worry, he'll come good," I feel like he was kind of something that he was probably thinking about for his own mum in that scene.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. And there's this real sense of innocence and inability about the character that you play. How did you manage to embody?
You just dropped out a little bit. Would you mind repeating the question?
I'm curious about the vulnerability you embody when playing Casey. I wonder if you embodied it.
The vulnerability, is that?
Yes, the vulnerability.
Yeah. I think approaching the character, it's the character really doesn't have that much dialogue, throughout the whole film. So I think with my performance, I tried to make it more nuanced with those moments of silence, in these moments, because I think that's when you can see the look on his face, and that's when he reveals a lot about himself, I think, in those quiet moments.
And I know that while we were rehearsing the film, that was a lot of the work that Josh did was because yes, the script is quite minimal in dialogue, especially for Casey, because that's the kind of character he is a man of very few words, and is not very comfortable expressing what's really going on for him emotionally, but there's a lot of stuff going on under the surface. So we were talking a lot about that stuff. So there's always a different intention running under what's being spoken, or the mask that he's wearing most of the time.
Sou eu, Daniel. Eu não sei porque é que você sumiu ou porque é que você parou de falar comigo, mas eu preciso entender, sabe? Toma cuidado, amiga. Você pode se machucar.
Okay, welcome back. For your own self-care, the next scene that we're going to watch highlights themes around suicide and suicidal ideation. So we encourage you to watch at your own discretion.
There was this guy I was seeing. He was married, had a young family. Where I'm from, it's not like here. We would meet in his truck, drive out to a paddock where no one was around. Went on for a while. Got lazy, I guess. Someone saw us. His wife. She took off with the kids. Everyone knew about it. Everyone blamed me. He blamed me. He ended up driving his truck head on into a semi-trailer. Drunk. Both drivers were killed. No one thought it was an accident. I know it wasn't. I ended up back in that paddock with my dad's shotgun in my mouth. Fuck. Weird thing though. Sitting there, dead set, ready to blow my brains out. Just kept thinking. Never seen the ocean.
Poignant statement, never seen the ocean. Craig, what do you think the ocean represented to Casey?
It's like this. I guess when I was thinking about it, it was a bit like the world that he had not experienced. It was a bit like, one of the things he discovers when he comes to Sydney, and there's this different landscape for queer people that he's never experienced before. He's never had that. So in some ways, it's a bit like that. Is sort of like this big unknown kind of possibility, and and it's also in a bit of an abyss. He's not in a good place, and it's that, and also physically, if you are from Central Australia, the ocean is such an abstract idea. It's a very different landscape. Australia is a country with a lot of land, and you can easily spend your entire life never experiencing that landscape. So it was an interesting space to use, and such a contrasting space for Casey as a character.
Yeah.
But water is such a good symbol of emotional turmoil as well. In the ocean is that it's this beautiful thing, but at the same time, it's a really dangerous thing. It's a big turbulent mass.
Yes, indeed. And tell us, if you will, about the choice for the setting, because you see the two of them sort of in this close context of this half-closed car with one door open, facing the ocean. Tell us about the choice to situate them there.
It's a great location. I've shot there before. I really love that's in Botany Bay, which is such a loaded place in Australia. It's like the point of colonization. It's a really beautiful place, but it's got a history of, you know, a lot of horror for a lot of people. It's a strange industrial landscape as well as being a beautiful natural space. So I really was drawn to that location in that way. It was a tricky place to shoot because we were shooting in a very active car park at the time, and it was very difficult. But it's beautiful. It's also quite close to La Perouse, which is an area where we shot a lot of the gay beach stuff around on the cliffs, around on the rocky areas, which is a very much a very loaded queer space in Sydney. You know, it's a place where, you know, the gays have kind of taken that space and have been kind of inhabiting it for a long time. So that's, you know, for people from Sydney, it's quite a familiar space.
I see. And Josh, earlier in the film, we see Casey being resuscitated from having been in the ocean. But this question lingers. Do you think he was trying to end his own life?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think he was. I think that was his intention. But, you know, he got saved, and then I think, and then continued hanging out with Tib, and he's like, wait, actually, maybe I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, indeed. And how do you think then that this sort of cocktail of blame and exposure and shame and death impacted the relationship with Tib?
Well, I guess, you know, Casey has a lot of stuff that, you know, he works through the film and stuff like that. I think guilt being, you know, a primary one of those feelings. And I think he, you know, the film's I think it's like a journey for him about forgiveness, you know, forgiving himself. And, you know, and once he realizes that, you know, I think they're able to come together at the end of the film. You know what I mean? He's able to take accountability, for things.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Well, following on from that, let's look at one more clip.
You have one saved message.
Listen, you need to calm the fuck down. What the fuck were you thinking? You can't come here. I love my wife. Fuck. I don't know what the fuck you think this is, but it's nothing. You get it? You're gonna ruin my fucking life. Is that what you're trying to do? Don't fucking come here again.
Listen.
Why are you listening to that?
I just had to stand there and lie my fucking ass off and tell them I had no idea who you were. Cops don't treat people like me the way they treat people like you. I'm gonna be on their fucking radar now.
I was trying to protect you.
I'm not your fucking boyfriend. I don't need you to protect me. You're too fucking needy.
That these assholes treat you like shit.
You can't even see how fucked up you are. You'd rather carry around your guilt like a stone than face the fact that what happened to you wasn't because of you.
Shut up.
It wasn't even real.
You're a fucking whore.
I'd rather be a fucking whore than be in the ground like your last boyfriend.
So there's really speaking their truths in this scene. Sensitivity certainly isn't on the agenda. And there's this return, I think, as well to their racial difference that is highlighted in the first scene that we watched. But somehow this difference lingers through the film, but isn't necessarily foregrounded. As filmmakers, tell us about the importance for you in this choice.
I mean, I think it was for me. I mean, the film is very much from Casey's point of view. So he's seeing these things and experiencing these things that are things that he hasn't experienced necessarily before, being a white Australian, but he's getting an understanding of the differences in their lives. as the story progresses. This scene is, yeah, it's very much it's a truth bomb scene where Tib is really putting it all on the table, and it's a wake up call scene. And it's a lot of stuff that Casey hasn't dealt with and doesn't know how to cope with emotionally, and lashes out and goes to his default, which is aggression and violence. So that's it's a pretty explosive scene. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult moment to come back from for a couple. It's like, domestic violence is not a great basis for a relationship. It's a difficult place, and not that it's a pattern of violence with him, but it's definitely too far. It's a deal breaker for Tib, and in that moment as well. And it's a terrible, and it's something Casey walks away with, is knowing that he did something terrible. Yeah.
And Josh, what supported you to get into contact with the anger and the hurt and the betrayal that's evoked in this theme, in this scene?
Yeah, I think what we were talking about before, I think this moment is like, is direct result of his guilt. You know what I mean? He feels ashamed and guilty about this awful thing that's happened, and he didn't want Tib to know. You know what I mean? So I think he felt really exposed in that moment. But I mean, it was quite confronting watching that scene back for me as an actor, because you never really get to see yourself angry. You know what I mean? And things like that. So yeah, that was a pretty jarring experience to see.
Was it? Tell me about the jarringness of it.
I mean, because I look a bit frightening when I'm angry, and I'm like, is this what I look like all the time when I get upset?
Yeah. And we haven't spoken so much about pride. I'm curious from you, what are you most proud of with this film?
I think the thing that I love about this film is that it is so queer, and when I watch it, and I know that the majority of the cast were queer people who came on board the project because it was a story that they were excited about telling, and many of the crew were as well, and that was a really beautiful thing about the making of this film. It was very much a band of queer folks coming together to tell a story that, in a different way to what we often see. I think often when we see our stories on screen, they sort of go through these industry processes, and there's a lot of people who want things explained to a broader audience, or want to dumb things down. But I think because of the way that we made it, because it was quite independent, we were quite free in lots of ways, and we could do what we wanted to do. And a lot of the team were quite new, people who hadn't necessarily worked on a feature film before, but that was great. They all stepped up. They love it, and I think that's something that I love, that's special about this film to me.
Yeah, and for you, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I was really proud of myself. I'm proud of the whole entire cast and crew. I mean, it's amazing watching it because I have such fond memories throughout filming. You know what I mean? And all these little anecdotes that only we know, and things like that. So I really love that experience watching the film, and I'm also it's always amazing to have your mum proud of you. So that's been I'm a mama's boy, and we love making mum proud. So.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Well, there's so much to be proud of here. We're going to take some answer questions and answers here. Question from Jamie: with so much graphic sex and nudity in the film, how did you approach this?
We worked with a fantastic intimacy coordinator, Leah Pelenkoff, who was amazing, really amazing. So it was we had sex scene school. We had these days where everyone in the film who was in some kind of sex scene came to this big workshop with Leah, and we worked through all of the scenes really, and just developing that safety for because that stuff can be really complicated and really awkward to film, and really unsafe if it's not handled well. So that process is very much about consent and just knowing what's going to happen in the scene, and being really forthcoming with how you feel about that, and that was a really great process. And Leah is also a lesbian. There was a queer woman, so she was really excited about putting queer sex on screen in the way that it happens, like rather than these kind of sanitized representations. So that was a lot of fun. Those scenes were actually quite fun to shoot, and much lighter than they maybe feel on the screen.
Yeah. And a question from Ralph: was the character of Casey based on anyone?
Based on a number of people from my life, people from my family, my own experience. There was a lot of little threads coming into building that character. I mean, me personally, I was born in a very small town in Queensland, and in my youth, I spent a lot of time between that landscape and the city where my parents moved to, and so it's always been a part of my life, and I've always wanted to film that kind of character, that person who comes from that space. So that I guess the short answer is there was a lot of threads coming into Casey there.
Okay. And another question from Fernando this time is: how truthful is the film with regards to the attitudes towards homosexuality between Metropolis Australia and rural Australia?
Quite truthful. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that, Josh? It's kind of similar to your experience.
I'm also from a really small country town as well. And I came out when I was 14, so quite young. And I had it really hard. Like rural Australia, I should say. It hasn't caught up with the city yet. But cities are generally, safe havens. Melbourne's a fantastic queer city. Sydney's, it's much the same as well.
Okay.
It's interesting though that's come up a few times where people are like, we don't live in that world anymore. People are fine outside of the city. But I live in Western Sydney, in which is kind of the outer region of Sydney, and we're not in any way inside the queer bubble, and it's a very different landscape even here. It's not a cool space to be openly queer, so those things are still a real landscape, in Australia. There's a long way to go. We've come a long way, and it's definitely better, and people can connect, via technologies, but it's still a rough place.
Yeah. So the film goes to dark place and ends positively in such a hopeful way.
It was important to me. I mean, I initially in the script had a bit of a more ambiguous ending where I probably shouldn't spoil the ending of the film, but it was hopeful, but probably a little more ambiguous. And then while we were filming, actually, conversation with Daniel Gabriel, who played Tim. Daniel was very adamant that that we have a beautiful kiss at the end of the film, and they were like, 12-year-old me needs to see a kiss at the end of this film. And so we filmed that, and it was great. They were right, and I think I was very conscious of the places that the film goes to that are dark places, and balancing that with lightness and hope was important, because it's not a miserable film to watch. It's a film that has those realities, but also there are moments of lightness and moments of fun within it as well, which was important, because it's true, even in a dire situation, we can find lightness in those moments, and queer people always have.
We turned into this question earlier again with perhaps you giving your views. Can you speak to the relationship with queer cinema, and we have to have nudity in a queer?
I mean, I think that we have less and less nudity in queer cinema. To be honest, I don't think that we do have to, but I feel like we are seeing more and more queer representation that is quite sanitized, that avoids seeing ourselves in that way, in a truthful sexual way. I think for us it was important for this film. I don't think it's necessary for every film, but that was a big part of the tone of this film. So yeah, we did need it in this one, but I don't think it's an absolute necessity for a queer film, and I think that there's a lot of queer films that don't have any nudity more and more.
Yeah, indeed. To you, Josh, from Shirley, this role.
Well, yeah, when I got sent the script from Craig during the auditions, I was really excited because just at how explicit the film is. I think it goes back into the question what Craig was saying before. As we're seeing more and more queer cinema, a lot of it does feel sanitized, so it feels more palatable, for a wider audience, because unfortunately, people still don't want to see two boys having sex with each other. So I really liked how unapologetic this film was, and just how explicit it was, and yeah, I was very, very eager to bring the story to life.
Just a last question from Shan. Just say your favorite other than Lonesome, of course.
There's so many. There's some good ones. My favorite Australian queer film is probably Head On by Anna Kokonas, which is quite an old film now. It's probably about 20 years old, but it's great. It's beautiful, based on a wonderful book called Loaded by Christos Sulkas. That's definitely worth a look. There's some great, more contemporary stuff. Actually, our cinematographer on Lonesome, Dean Francis, is also a director in his own right, and he made a great film called Drown a few years ago. It was quite
very
brutal.
Good film.
It's a very good one to check out.
Yeah, and
I really like Holding the Man's a good one. I like Holding the Man. I thought that was really cute. And of course, Priscilla. That's like just a classic.
Yeah. Pleasure to talk with you both. Where did it come from? The music.
Oh, the music. The music was created entirely by musical genius Tony Bushin, who was our composer, and he did an amazing job of the score. We spent a lot of time sitting in his studio just talking about the kind of sounds we wanted to hear. We wanted to riff on westerns and bring in a bit of banjo, a bit of whistling, and that sort of stuff. But he built the score entirely, and even wrote a couple of really great songs for the film. But yeah, he's a genius, and he's got this brilliant studio that has a room with every instrument you could possibly imagine in it. It's a wonderful place. It was really, really fun actually building the score.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we both for speaking, sharing your perspective.
Monsieur Belcourt, vous avez fait bon voyage?
Oui.
Bon, ça fait longtemps que vous n'êtes pas revenu?
35 ans, depuis que je suis parti en fait.
Laissez-moi vous présenter notre grand écrivain, Stéphane Belcourt.
Bonsoir, enchanté. Votre nom? Andrieux, Lucas Andrieux. Ah, c'est amusant. J'ai connu un Thomas Andrieux au lycée.
Il n'y en a pas eu 150, hein, c'était mon père, je pense. Vous le connaissiez bien?
Comme ça.
Il faudra le dire à personne. C'est dur de l'imaginer avec des potes. Allez, viens! La ferme, c'était boulot, tout le temps. Il était comment, mon père? Qu'est-ce que tu fous là? Je t'ai dit que ça devait rester entre nous. Tu te rends pas compte? Toi, tu vas te barrer, moi, je resterai. Je sais que si je reste, j'en crèverai, et toi aussi.
La seule fois où il s'illuminait, c'est quand vous passiez à la télé. C'était qui pour vous? Mais putain, pourquoi vous voulez pas me répondre?
Tu me réserves encore d'autres surprises comme ça? Ton père m'a abandonné du jour au lendemain, comme pour toi, sans un mot, sans une explication. Qu'est-ce que tu viens de dire là?
Je suis très mal à l'aise, alors on se calme.
Stéphane, tu as ta vie qui t'attend. Je suis sûr que tu vas pas t'arrêter là.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe, Lucas? Explique-moi.
Tout va bien. Je te dirai plus tard. Tout ce qui m'a laissé, c'est des questions. Mais moi, je l'ai aimé comme un fou, ton père.